One moment. Okay, you're now streaming live.
You like to welcome our visitors and those who are watching to our agenda meeting, our work session for the budget FY 2022. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Roll call.
Mayor Bennett,
Here.
Vice Mayor Pardon,
Here.
Councilor Pelham,
Here.
Councilor Denton,
Here.
Councilor Gore,
Here.
Councilor Randolph,
Here.
Councilor Holloway.
Here.
Mayor Bennett, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Altman.
Thank you, Mayor Bennett. Good evening, everyone. I hope everybody had a good day and enjoyed the unseasonably warm weather. I don't know about you, but I'm not ready for 90 degrees yet this year. This evening, the primary purpose really is one, to thank you and members of council for allowing us to look at options for a cost of living increase for our employees and to bring some options back for y'all. And while you've got a static piece of paper, I have a spreadsheet. If you have thoughts of what you might want to do, I can use and change the numbers a little bit and see where we're at. One of the items that you asked for at the last work session was a list of the service contract increases, which we included in your packet this evening for all those departments that had that item as one of their increases in their budget. We listed all of those. And then I added the city attorney's just FOIA software. We added that to the initial list that was provided. So that should all be in your packet this evening for you to look at. If you could, Mayor Bennett, go down, scroll down. So this is the list of all of the service contracts, the department, the contract, and a description of what that contract is for each one of them. If you've got specific questions about an item, just send me an email and we can get a broader description of what that item might be for you. But these are all of the service contracts that we had that had an increase with them for the FY22 budget year, similar to what we had when we had the FY22. Yes, ma'am.
I want her to scroll down to finance.
Finance uses the Munis software, and that's all housed in IT. Finance doesn't have a software packet. These are all like service contracts for software increases. That's what these are.
So not service contract for people.
No.
Well, is that something different we have to look at?
No, we can get that for you, but the piece in finance is it's not a set number for the VML VACO assistance. That's based on the utilization of the people that they're providing us.
But it's a service contract, though, right?
Yes, but we didn't budget an increase in that service contract. These are all increases. So again, if you have questions about any of the specific items, we can get that to you. The next sheet that you have here is.
Hold on, Mr. March.
Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible, with these names, could you give us what the contract was and then what the increase is?
We could do that.
I mean, it's a budget meeting, so we need to know value, don't we? I would think.
Well, what we did was in the previous budget meeting, in the presentation that I gave last time, there is a total amount of increase shown in that presentation for all of these for each department. We didn't break it down individually. We just said police had an increase of $12,000 for service contracts. And these are all of the softwares or items that make up that increase. We didn't break it down by individual product. We just lumped it all together as service contract increases.
And was the increase is based on a certain number of percentages or based on increase in services?
Well, some of these are user fees, so when we talk, similar to when we talked about one of our Munis modules, we say the initial year it'll cost us $5,000 to purchase it, and then the following years we'll have an annual fee of $2,000, and the following year $3,000, then $4,000. That's what these increases represent, increases in the service fee for that product. So the Axion Enterprise Inc. under police, that's their evidence.com annual storage and license fee. So that's cloud storage for their body cam videos. That cost went up this year. Not that we have, if we may have bought more storage based on the need to have more storage, but that cost went up. The license fee may have gone up on that product also. So it just depends on what the service is, but these are, again, all of the items that were lumped into that one number from the previous budget work session. But we can break these down for you if you like.
No, thank you.
What I understand, Mr. Altman, is that these are subscription and software service packages, right?
It's a subscription. So like here, shredding services, that's the company that comes in and shreds documents when it's time for us to do that. So these are all either a software or a subscription service that we have. The one that I note here that isn't is Creator Criminal Justice Academy, but that's where we do all of our police officer training. So we had an increase in everyone had an increase in the fee to the academy this year, but all of these are services, under Fire, Rico USA, that's our copier lease. And of course, Comcast is internet access. Image Trend is the reporting software they have. So all of these are, yes, ma'am, going to be either a subscription or a software.
And the other thing is when, you said they're under contract? So
Yeah, we have either a contract or an agreement, a license agreement that we sign for software.
And how long, what is the time period? I mean, the periods of periods of that contract? Is it like from 2018 until 2022 and then you have to redo a contract? Or is it something different?
Well, I think it's probably depends on which one. I mean, say Motorola. I mean, Motorola is our radio and dispatch equipment. So we don't have a 10-year contract with them. They're our service provider. As long as we utilize Motorola radios, we're going to have an agreement with Motorola. So as those costs increase,
like what is the length of time with the agreement?
Ma'am?
The length of time for the agreement? Like, is it under a contract or we just say, we're going to go with Motorola and these are what the service fees are going to be every year? So there's nothing that's locked in with them saying, okay, well, I'm going to use Motorola, and we don't have a service contract with them. It's just something that we use them, and every year we just go ahead and pay the increase. Yeah.
So say with Motorola, we spent, and I had left the city at that point in time, but Mrs. Pelham and probably Ms. Gore were here on council. We probably spent $7 million to put in a new radio system. So we can, unless we're going to switch systems to a different provider, which would cost us millions of dollars again, we will continue to be locked in with Motorola on utilization and service fees with them as long as we're utilizing their services. I noticed here that the city attorney has commented that regarding particularly the police contracts, that she had reported out an end date, I guess, to y'all at some point in time for many of those agreements. So,
That's correct, sir. So members of council, I think several months back, I went through a list of police contracts or current police contracts and indicated whether those had expired or were continuing and the terms for their continuation. So if they were current but had 2 more periods for renewal, that was reported out. If they were entered into for a multiple number of years, the expiration date was reported out. So, with respect to this list, based on Mayor Bennett's question, what I can do if it's okay with you and the city manager doesn't have any objection, sort of match these names out that were formally reported out with the expiration dates. But that won't be tonight. That will obviously be for another time.
If all of council is okay with that, then we can move forward. I was just trying to get an understanding as if it was under contract or is it someone that we're just doing business with and accepting the inflation increase, every year. So that was just a question that I had. But this could push it and send it all out to us. The information be really helpful.
Okay, and sometimes it would be just a matter of, the underlying contract having expired and then a new purchase order has been sort of authorized to deal with the fact that there's no underlying contract, but there are continued services provided and received.
Mayor Bennett, may I ask that this also be put on the council share drive so that it doesn't have to be lost in the mass of paperwork that we're constantly getting, that it can be on there, that we can reference it back to it whenever we please.
Thank you, Mr. Altman. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
you're welcome. So the next item is the kind of looking at options for the COLA. So if you scroll down again, so I put 3 options here, but there's several different combinations depending upon council's desire if you wanted to add positions. So what we had in the budget available in the general fund was the $338,000. And that's when we came to the last budget work session. I was looking at positions and potentially a class and comp study to use up those funds. And we had a discussion, and I know that I appreciate, and I'm sure staff does, how constitutional officers, comp board positions and schools were getting 5% increases from the state. At that point, I was unable to give the city employees an increase. Then you thankfully asked that we go look at those options. So what we have is just for a point of reference, if we were to do a 5% cost of living increase for all city employees, it would cost us $1.1 million. And if we were going to do that effective January 1, that's $550. A cost of living of 2.5% for the entire year is $550,000. And if we were looking at effective January 1, it's $275,000. And then we have a listing of all the positions that were requested by city staff, absent one, which is the lab tech position at Hopewell Water Renewal, and that's an enterprise fund, so that doesn't come from the general fund, which is what we're dealing with here. General fund positions, the enterprise fund, they generate the revenue, and in that case, with that position, it's a cost savings because of the contracted services out would be eliminated, and we would save money with the addition of the position. So we have the $338,000. We could do the 2.5% effective January 1 and still have some money left over to look at positions. Or the option would be to go, so we had to make, because our capital side, our funding streams for the capital side of the house were where we were short. So that's meals, sales, lodging, and our $295 ticketing money. So we had to make a transfer to from the general fund to capital of $500,000. So what I looked at on the sheet was, if you pulled that $500,000 back, what could you do with it? Now, not to get everyone worried about what would happen to capital, the thought would be to then backfill that $500,000 with your American Rescue Plan Act funding that you would get. So then you would just plug those dollars in, because that's the side of the house where we had revenue shortfall. And that's kind of what these dollars are for. We could plug that $500,000 in and make capital whole again. Plus we'd have other money, because we're going to get almost $5.3 million over 2 years, 2.75 a year. You'll have additional money to do other capital work if you wanted to, or other things with those dollars over those 2 years. But in this case, we could backfill that 500 if you wanted to use all of it. So the scenario under option 2, at the $550,000, 2%, 2.5% COLA for the entire year, when you drop down, you have the $338,000. The reduction in the transfer to the general fund to capital would be $212,000 to meet the need to get to that $550,000. We'd still have money going to capital of $288,000, and you would backfill $212,000 to make this year whole. And then any additional projects that we'll talk about that we want to utilize those funds for, we'll be able to do that with. Scenario 3 adds some positions. So council has talked a great deal during the year about the rental inspection program and a desire to support that. So that position's in there included. The IT Munis administrator position's been discussed quite a bit, so I had included that in mine. And then the conversion of the 2 part-time animal shelter custodian positions into one full-time position. The $19,000 here represents the difference that would be needed to make that into a full-time position. So those then create that's a 700. The raises.
What happened?
I can't hear you.
Mr. Altman, I think you're muted.
You're muted.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I guess the mayor got tired of me talking. I got muted by the host. So the raise, the $550,000 plus the positions comes down. That's the $713,823. We had the $338. Then what we would need is we would have to have bring back from capital the $375,823. That makes that whole. And then we would backfill that with the American Rescue Plan Act money. So it really comes down to positions that you may want to add in addition to, or what combos are. I would recommend that we not exceed the $500,000 that we transferred from the general fund, because then if we're pulling back more than we transferred from the general fund, that means next year we're going to have to find that money again. So I would limit it to 500. I'm kind of a fiscal conservative, so I want to limit it as much as possible. But I want to make sure, and I appreciate the fact that council was willing to look at doing a raise for the employees, and I really would like to be able to do that. And at a minimum, if we could get option 2 done, that would be fantastic. And then I had talked about doing a class in comp. I'm willing to push that out a year So we don't have to worry about that right now. If we're doing a raise, I think the employees would much rather have a raise than a class and comp study. So I would much rather do that for the employees. So that's why that isn't in any scenario that I've put up here. That's kind of a brief, quick overview. I see Ms. Randolph has her hand up and Ms. Pelham has her hand up.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Couple of thoughts during this is that we have, and I'm in favor of giving at this point, giving a 2.5% increase to everybody starting right away, not waiting till the first of next year. And I'm certainly interested in a couple of positions, and I appreciate your kind of doing these options out for us. The one thing that I've noticed though is if we make some decisions on some other areas, because one of the things that I liked that you said is that you were willing to push out the class and comp or comp and class study in lieu of this raise. And if we do that, I certainly think that we should be asking schools to do that. Yes, I understand that they have also pushed it out previously, but I think if they're all getting at least a 5% raise, excuse me, then I think that they should also push that out, which is another $600,000 that they've asked for that, we don't have to come up with, because if I'm not mistaken in looking at their budget's almost $1.5 million more than what we gave to them last year, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Mr. Altman?
Well, I think once you factor in the supplemental appropriation that we provided, you're correct.
Okay. And that concerns me because, I haven't got good answers as to, why. And, education is important to our constituents and their children, but that aspect is still looming over us. The second thing that I'll say is that from 2018 annual audits, there is supposed to be some money left over from schools, if I'm not mistaken, in the amount of $1.8 million that I'm sure they'd like to keep, but I don't see all of that staying with them and another million on top of that coming into a new budget. So if we were to take back some of that $1.8 million from the annual audit of 2018, does that not go into the general fund, Mr. Altman?
Yeah, anything that is not spent by one of the ancillary units comes back to the city, would come back to the general fund. Yes, ma'am. And that's why we've brought it back and then the supplemental appropriation back to them in previous years. That would be the process, but you would be able to retain whatever amount of that you wanted to.
So I think that with that amount of money, we're talking $1.8 million and $600,000 for pushing off just the schools class and comps. Not saying that we're going to do that, but that's over $2 million, almost $2.5 million that could help us have more leeway to do some of the things the city needs to do. So I think there's a fair amount that this budget and this council needs to look at for this budget before we can make full vetted decisions on this scenario. I myself would love to be able to give this raise immediately. So I caution all of us that there's a lot of floating money out there that, while I know the schools need it, and I'm not saying that we're not going to, reimburse them or we're not going to do this, because we have to decide as a majority of council what we're going to do. That's a fair bit of money. And I want us to make sure that we are going to discuss that and fully understand where that can go and what we can do with that in lieu of what you've proposed here. Thank you.
My question was, Mr. Altman, the rescue money Yeah, I thought I read something that said you couldn't use that money for uh, expenditures in your operation.
No, so what really the point this time, as opposed to CARES, was to recognize the lack of revenue, the shortfall in revenue caused by the pandemic that localities may be dealing with. So you can use this to supplement or fill in holes or gaps in revenue loss. But what they don't want you to use it to do is supplant money. So we're not allowed to reduce our real estate tax rate or our tax rate and create a hole and fill with it. But they're recognizing the fact that, unfortunately for us, we haven't had a lot of this, but we may have had some community may have had a lot of restaurants that just shut down. So you're not getting meals tax as you were before, and they're recognizing that fact with the rescue plan money. So we're going to be able to utilize that to supplement and then do additional work with it. And as we talked a little bit the last time, because it's one-time money, I would like for us to focus more on one-time projects for those dollars as opposed to long-term or people, because then that creates a need in the future for funds to do that with. So whether it's
So next
additional
year
money
we have to
for,
come up with 550 somewhere else.
so
Correct. I mean, I agree with it. I'm saying, so we would have to, whatever monies new revenues we have, we
Mhm.
already have obligated that $550,000, correct?
Well, the big thing of the 550 so the 338 we haven't obligated. So that's sitting there. That's not my contingency. The contingency line in the budget's there. This is 338 of unobligated funds at this point in time. So all you're looking for to get to 550 is finding, either the 212,000 if you don't want to do any of the positions to get there. And what my thought was is because we have the Rescue Plan Act money coming, we could pull some of that transfer, because we took general fund money and sent it to capital because of shortfall on that side. We just pull some of that back, use revenue, the American Rescue Plan Act money to fill that shortfall. And then we've got 2 years of revenue, Rescue Act money. By that point in time in the third year out, which would be 23, 24, we should see return of our revenue stream. I know the big one, and we all know, is we get out on 295 and we write tickets, and that's back up and running. Whereas last year when Corona started, and then this year, that's had some impact and reduced revenue for us because they weren't out writing tickets as much because of the COVID. So they're back out doing that. And I would anticipate that we'd see a return in that revenue and then that way the hole would get plugged on its own by that revenue source coming back to play, and we could just use that money right now to help us on this side.
So that's where the money came from, capital. You keep saying we did that. When do we do that? When do we put $500,000 in the capital?
So the capital budget that I showed y'all last week, which was $1 million for our VDOT projects, the lease on the fire truck, a plotter up in development.
That was in this packet. Okay.
So what we had to do to make that work is we had to take $500,000 from the general fund and transfer it to capital. All I'm talking about is pulling some of that back. You can still fund those projects, and you can fund even more with the American Rescue Plan Act money.
Question, did we do that this fiscal year?
The current fiscal year, we had to make a transfer from the general fund to capital. Yes, we did. And in the proposed budget here, we're having to do the same thing.
So we already approved the transfer.
When you adopted the FY21 budget, yes, you did.
Okay. And it was from the $295 that was a drop in revenue.
Yeah, we took a significant hit in 295 money, about, if I remember correctly, in the neighborhood of 600 grand we didn't have.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Parton, unmute yourself.
Thank you. My first question is there ways that we can not take that transfer from capital back to the general fund for operations? I mean, are there areas that you all can try to find and tighten budgets in order to try to help close in some of that gap?
Excuse me.
We can look. I mean, we budget on utilization, not wish, if you will. So, I mean, we could look to cut if you wanted to, but again, knowing that we have the rescue, I mean, that money, you're going to be able to use that for all kinds of capital. So, this to me, because at some point in time when our revenues return, I would look to pull that money back to the general fund for operational needs, which we know, I mean, just looking at the list of positions and items that we have operational needs. So we can look, but for this seems to me to be the easiest way to get to that number that we have, and we know that we've got ample source to do it.
The reason that I'm asking is because if the city is forecasting an additional $1.7 million in new revenue coming to the city, and that's through all the different revenue streams. And I mean, I understand there are things that end up coming up like service contract increases and other issues and healthcare costs increasing, but it's very hard for citizens to swallow that of the $1.7 million in new revenue that's coming in, that there's only $338,000 in floating general fund money, if you will, for things like either hiring more police officers, hiring more firefighters, any of these positions, doing a pay raise, or even trying to ramp up the capital improvements program. It's something that I know is going to be very hard for people to swallow and for people to come to grips and understand. And I mean, that's one reason why I'm very apprehensive about cutting any money to the capital program, because yes, even though we are getting the American Rescue money, and we really and truly do have chronic issues with our infrastructure in the city. I mean, sinkholes are popping up, issues with utility lines breaking and collapsing and needing repair. Of course, road deferred maintenance. I mean, there's just a lot of things that I really think that it's going to be my annual bandwagon speech. But I really do think that we really need to ramp up our capital improvement program, especially some of the other things like park renovations, getting back to those. Working towards taking care of a lot of what we have and trying to get caught up on a lot of this deferred maintenance.
Mm-hmm. Well, the reality here is you'd only be doing $500,000 worth of capital work this year if the general fund didn't make a transfer. So we would be able to do a lot of these things. We could hire 6 patrol officers for that $500,000. But we know we have capital commitments, and that's why we move the money over, particularly on the road side of the world with our VDOT projects. So that's why we made the transfer. So, and yes, we did have an increase in revenue, but at the same time, cost of everything goes up. Gas goes up, heating and electrical. We've got a police department that we're figuring out now how much we need to really budget there to pay the electric bill and pay all those bills. When you first built the building, you estimated in that budget. And we will have probably during the year additional revenue that may come in, but I'm not going to count that at all. I'm not going to bank on potential revenue. I'd rather see it in my hand before we even begin to account for it or spend it. So I understand what you're saying completely. I completely anticipated the annual speech on capital. And I anticipate another one on paving and whatnot as we go through it. But again, that's where I think that American Rescue Plan Act money is going to let us do more of that capital that we can't afford to do right now. We can look at a couple of park projects. We can look at additional paving. We could look at addressing some of the rolling stock issues that we have in departments that have needs. So those are some of the things that I think we'll be able to do. And I think we'll be able to see over the next couple of years quite a bit of money that if you wanted to spend it on capital projects, we'll be able to make that happen.
All right, I'll defer my next set of questions after everyone else has a chance to talk.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Pelham. You're muted. Still muted, Ms. Pelham.
I never took my hand down. I think
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
But yeah, but I just to reiterate, I do agree that keep in mind that monies that dividing money, maybe not equally, but that is my pleasure as well, that monies go back into neighborhoods.
Mhm.
Keep hope alive for them to see that their tax dollars are benefiting them for staying in the city. And one of the things I noticed is that I talked to Mr. Butler too as well, is the fact that when streets improve, people start improving their homes, like in the Maple Street area or wherever, and even on another Salem. People, I mean, they have new homes there now, of course, but where they're older homes, when the streets improve, I've seen residents who put money into their, whether it's landlord rented or whatever, but they do try to improve the status of the place that they live in. So
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, I'll piggyback off of that as well. Just seeing the improvement of redoing the entire road on Princess Anne Street. I would be willing to venture that every person that lives on that street has done some major improvement to their house, which has resulted in their real estate assessment going up, which again, just turns more dollars back over to the city. I mean, between taking up, beating up driveways and putting down paver driveways, enhanced landscaping, a lot of people putting new roofs on. I mean, I have to agree, wholeheartedly with Ms. Pelham on that one. I don't think you can get a whole lot better bang for your buck than reinvesting those dollars back into the neighborhood. Because when the constituents go put money back into their homes and we start seeing their assessments go up, I mean, we in turn get the money right back, and it's almost as if it pays for itself.
So is there any thought on what option you would like to go down as far as at least doing the raise? Is there a consensus to do the 2.5% effective July 1 for the entire year so we can move forward with programming that into the budget?
and that's the 550.
Yes, ma'am.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of it. I mean, I just don't want to, take money away from capital right now. I mean, I would like, to see what options there are in, seeing where, there's some cost savings within the budget to see if we can equalize that out.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm on board with the 3.5. I mean, the 2.5 starting in July, please.
So what are you going to do with the projected 1.7 revenue? Because that's not reflected here.
Are you
The
talking
1.7.
that? No, that 1.7 is what's left of that base after we do the service contract increases, the cost of any of the increases that we had in the budget for fuel, all of those things. What we have left of that 1.7 is that $338,000.
Really? And we approved that already? No,
That's-
we haven't. So can we see those costs from 1.7 to 338 to see if that's something we can adjust?
If y'all want to do that, we can.
That will give us a whole picture.
Well, yeah, and what I would say is a lot of what it's caught up in is just typical increases in your budget. I mean, we're not funding some big program somewhere or sneaking off building something. It's just your typical increases from an annual basis, but we can,
Talking about $1.4 million almost in typical increases. That don't seem real to me.
well, we got to remember of that $1.4 million, 500,000 of it went to capital. So it's not 1.4.
So 900,000.
900,000 in increases that you have throughout the year of your budget.
Not much every year, because I don't know. I mean, those are the kind of things you can put in a sheet as well, so that we could get the whole picture of and how it compares to like last year's budget or something else. And that would give us a more complete information to make a more viable decision to me. But you just say $900,000 in little increases for gas, oil, electricity, not benefit. This doesn't seem like a lot of money to me.
Yeah, we can break that down for you.
I don't know. I mean, I think it would help us make a total decision, a better decision, if we look at it and see if we could swap something in and out for it. I don't know.
So I've heard 3 of y'all indicated you're in favor of the 2.5 at July 1. Is there a 4th?
I am. I'm in favor of a 2.5. This is Councilor Holloway.
Thank you,
In
ma'am.
favor of a 2.5 increase, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also feel the same way.
Okay, I see Ms. Denton has her hand up. Ms. Denton, you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, I am for the 550 effective July the 1st. I think if we read the newspapers and listen to the news, we can understand why a lot of these costs are going up. Due to COVID, the expenses, from what they are saying right now, the gas is going to continue to go up. I haven't seen anything that's going down. So I wholeheartedly agree, everything is going up. And it's going to cost more to run our city. So I think we best look at this very carefully, because we don't want to underfund any of the funds that are operating the city on a day-to-day basis.
And I would point out that one of the departments where you're talking about this increase, we got to remember we added officers to PD, which was an increase during the middle of the year that we went into the undesignated fund balance to do. So now we've got to have that revenue. So that's factored in this increase also. So it's a combination of different things that we've done throughout the year, or we're experiencing. I know on the public works side, materials are getting more and more expensive every day for our work. And unfortunately, if everyone's watching the news, they're talking about gas prices going through the roof this summer, not because of a shortage in gas, but because of a shortage of drivers to drive the tanker trucks to deliver the gas. So, those are some of the ultimately things that are dealt with, but we can look at that breakdown of that revenue. And if you go into the budget materials that we provided for you, there's a breakdown of the general fund budget, and it shows FY22 proposed budgets. It also shows a comparison to 22 and 21 from the departmental standpoint, and shows the dollar increase in each department. So we can look to tell you what those increases are.
Thank you.
Is anyone interested in funding any positions, or just looking at?
I had my hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
it's okay. I was waiting for a chair to say something. I know if we were just
I'm
talking.
sorry, Ms. Gore. I didn't I was looking down and I started talking. I didn't see your hand.
It's okay. I have a few questions.
Okay.
First is, so with the 500,000, we took it from last year, and now you're proposing that we take it again from this year. So it's correct to say we had $1 million taken from our our reserves, not
No,
the
no.
rainy day reserves, but from our cash balances, correct?
No, we didn't take any money from our reserves to balance the budget last year. We're not doing it this year. We're just taking dollars from the general fund and moving it to the capital fund to make capital whole. We're not going into our fund balance to
So when I
balance the
said-
budget.
Okay, so I didn't mean to say rainy day. So it's our general fund, our cash reserves. We're taking
No,
from
no,
there.
not cash reserve. This is our operating money.
Yep.
So we have, since
So
I've
we
been
have
here,
unassigned balance and assigned. We have unassigned and assigned funds. Assigned funds is typically what we call our operating budget from what we have when we adopt a budget. The unassigned funds is usually split into two: our reserve, our cash that we just have on hand, like the $3-4 million, and then we have our rainy day fund. Both of those make up the unassigned fund.
correct.
Okay, so we're taking from unassigned funds that's in the.
No,
So no, so where you say you keep saying operating budget, but how are you taking from the operating budget? That's what's not making sense to me.
so we'll talk in terms of that $1.7 million increase of in the general fund, which is our operating budget, not unassigned fund balance, operating budget. We're transferring $500,000 from the general fund to capital so we can fund capital projects and make sure our VDOT projects are funded. So we're not going into fund balance. This is the revenue that we have. If we weren't transferring that money, let's say this is, we had a great year on the capital side funding. It's whole. We don't need any money. Instead of talking about $338,000, we would be talking about $838,000. So it's general fund revenue, it's operating money, assigned money that we're talking about. And we're not, since I've been here, we haven't used unassigned fund balance to balance a budget, period. We do not, that is a horrible practice to do that, because that means the next year you're already in the hole starting out the year because you went to your savings account and borrowed money instead of just using the money you were getting every week in your check. And so we're not doing that. We're only using regular operating assigned funds to balance our budget and make it whole. But we had to take, in order for the VDOT projects to be whole, for them to still get the revenue in, do the revenue sharing, we had to move $500,000, actually $532,000 from the general fund over to capital. That transfer would be part of the budget.
Okay, so I'm gonna word it this way. I'm following you, but I want to make sure. So just the word transfer is what's my sticking point. So when we have revenue, it comes in, it goes to our general fund. Our general fund is divided by assigned and unassigned funding, correct?
Our general fund is our assigned funds. Our general operating fund is what we operate out of every day during the fiscal year. That's the money we spend, our general fund. The unassigned fund balances sit off to the side. They're not included in the $52 million that we typically have, 52 to 54 million in our general fund budget.
Okay. So we just increased the capital budget by $500,000. You keep using the word transfer,
right?
But,
because you transfer between funds. Capital
Right.
fund is a separate fund, so we have to
I
make.
understand that. So my point I'm trying to make is we increased the capital budget by $500,000.
You didn't really increase it. What you're doing is you're moving the money from general fund to capital to address the shortfall in funding on the capital side. We didn't. So typically we have, let's just say.
But isn't that an increase? And the reason I'm asking is because let's say, so our capital improvement budget for just grins and giggles, $100,000.
Mhm.
That's what we typically do, $100,000. And if the next year we decide to increase it by $500,000 from the general fund, that is an increase. You're not using the word transfer. We're just voting to increase the budget.
So in your scenario, we have $100,000 annual capital budget.
Mhm.
What we're experiencing is of the funds that go into capital,
Mhm.
sales, lodging, meals, and 295, we
Mhm.
really only have 50,000. So we're taking 50,000 from the general fund, transferring it to capital to bring it back to the annual $100,000 level. We're not increasing beyond what we had. We're making it whole to what we typically have.
Okay.
So we can support the VDOT projects. The our VDOT projects and that program that Mr. Butler and Mr. Austin run with the revenue sharing projects, the paving projects, that's $1 million a year.
No, I'm on the same page with you now. So
Yeah.
so it goes back to the point I'm trying to make is if we're transferring money
Mhm,
to make the fund whole,
mhm.
and this would be the second year we would need to do that. How are we thinking about sustainability moving forward if 2 years in a row we did not have enough revenue coming in to sustain it? And then now we're adding potentially reoccurring positions, the cost for reoccurring positions, and then the cost for reoccurring grays.
Right. So the biggest hit that we took was 295 funding.
Mm-hmm.
They were not out on 295 when we did last year's budget. They were not out writing tickets because of COVID. So
Right.
we know that with their increased activity back out on 295, we anticipate that those dollars will recover.
But 295 money isn't used for everything in the capital. So was the reduction strictly related to what 295 is able to fund, or was there other reductions outside of 295 money?
So we saw decreases in the last budget in some meals because we had, restaurants were at the beginning of COVID weren't open because everybody was shut down. So we saw a decrease in meals, but $295 were the main funding source. And those dollars have always stayed from the time that we created them they funded capital. They've never funded anything in the general budget. So they've always been on the
Right.
capital side. And what we anticipate is with the increase, so they're back out writing tickets again. We've gotten, they've been vaccinated, so that's happening, and we anticipate that those funds will recover over the next year. And again, we will have additional operating expense for next year, and we anticipate that revenues will increase on the capital side. So we're hoping that you don't have to make as big of a transfer as you're having to do this year. And then if we don't have to make that transfer, then that's great. If there is a need for a transfer, we can always look at the second year of your American Rescue Plan Act money to fill a void as we watch those revenues recover to their normal level. We fully anticipate in the year, 2 years from now, that we'll be back where we were before.
Mm-hmm.
We're not anticipating that we're going to see a continued downward trend in those revenues.
Okay, so I have a few other questions regarding that. So the general fund, well, you're separating it. I forgot, I think we did that like 2 budget cycles separated out, but at first it was not separated. It was always in one general fund, and it was assigned and unassigned. I think there was 2 budget cycles ago, Mr. Terry said we had to separate it out. So my thought process is still thinking it's all in one pot of money.
Right.
So I think you understand what I'm trying to say. So I'm not, it's okay. So with the unassigned balance, we haven't gotten our CAFRs, we haven't gotten our annual audits and CFAs completed. For a while, I've been asking to figure out what is the on-hand number. And I'm not talking about the $51 million, because that includes monies that are not solely ours. So I think the last estimate that we received, we were told it was like $5 to $6 million there, but that included the money that we had took from the school's bus fund. So with this proposed additional transfer, what is our on-hand balance in the general fund for unassigned money?
So the bus fund money, you returned all of that to schools. So that none of that hit back on our bottom line. Y'all returned all that to schools because they had expenditures that they had already committed to that they needed to pay the bills on.
Right.
So y'all had returned all that. I'm trying to think off the top of my head what our number is. I'm trying to go through math in my mind, what we've taken away. But if my memory serves me correctly, there's probably at least $5 million sitting in cash that's just sitting outside of investments and other items, but $5 million in cash, if I remember correctly.
Can you make a note for Mr. Terry or someone from the finance department to give us that estimate, please? So we're just tracking that because we're going to be drawing from that number again this year, correct?
No, we're not.
Because you say you separate, but I don't see how you could say you separate it out when it's still unassigned money, unless you just pull it from your right.
Okay, but we're not dealing with any unassigned money.
So I guess the question, what does not make sense to me is, are you just doing this off of revenue projections? How are you pulling money from a separate location and not saying you're drawing from it?
We're not. So the budget is based on revenue projections for real estate, M&T, meals, lodging, and sales based on historic trends. This year we had a reassessment, so we know what that number is for real estate. So we have a total value, whatever that number is, times our tax rate, and that gives you the amount of money that you will get, barring what happens at the BOE. But that generally generates around, let's see, increase in value. So we're generating 16, so we know what those numbers are going to be. On the M&T side, we know what the values of the machinery and tools are. So that's multiply that. So you've got numbers and you've got trend. So you see where it's trending. So we're not going into our savings account. What we're doing is we're saying every year we generate X number of dollars in real estate tax revenue. This is the treasurer provides us her collection rate. You multiply that number by the collection rate. This is what you're going to get, what you think you're going to collect every year, because not everyone pays their taxes. So you got to take that into account. So we're not going and we're not dipping in anywhere. We're utilizing the money that's going to be generated in local tax revenue to fund the general fund. This year, total revenue that we're expecting in general fund revenue is $54,328,648. Of that, some of that's going to be money coming in from other sources, but we have a transfer of that $54 million. Of that, there's a transfer of $500,000 out of that 54 million from the general fund over to capital, because that's a separate fund. We have to make a transfer to make capital whole because of the reduction in revenue on the capital side. So we're not going into the unassigned fund balance. We don't use unassigned fund balance to balance a budget. That's a bad deal. The only time we did use unassigned fund balance this year for the reoccurring PD positions, when we talked about and y'all wanted to fund additional positions, that's the only place we could go to get those dollars. We went there to get the dollars for the additional patrol officers and their vehicles. So we went there. That meant we started out this year really in a hole, because we knew we had to fill that hole that we created with reoccurring revenue out of the gate. But the budget that we've presented doesn't use any of the unassigned fund balance. It doesn't typically what people could refer to or relate to as their savings account. We're not touching our savings account to balance the budget.
I'll circle back. Let me look for something in my email. I know what I'm asking. Let me circle back to this. Let somebody else have a chance to talk. I'll come back to you.
Mrs. Pelham?
Oh, yeah. How much was the cost of the paying for the medical insurance for employees? Was that more than 338,000?
No, there was we budgeted an increase of 100,000 and we ended up with a $53,000 increase. So we got a little bit extra money there.
All right. Well, that's an increase to their paychecks too, right? Because
No,
technically they don't have to pay for the insurance. The city is
correct. The city's absorbing the increase in the cost, so we're not passing that cost on to the employee. And the reason that I recommended doing that, because I didn't think I'd be able to do a budget, and I didn't want to have an employee make less money on July 1 than they did on June 30th because health insurance went up.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's like an increase in a supplemental increase of their paychecks. They don't get less, sure. So
they're not getting less, but they're not getting any more for the health increase. If we weren't doing a raise, salaries would stay flat. No one would receive a decrease because we absorbed that cost, but nobody would be getting an increase.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Thoughts on positions?
I would like to see us be able to do the option 3, if at all possible. Because we do need to get that rental inspection program off and going in our city. And I believe the administrator for the Munis is needed, as well as the animal. That's not that much. I would just like option 3, if it's at all possible.
I would say option 3 with the Munis person, because that seems to be the trouble with our system. I mean, people not understanding how to integrate that system into their daily workspace. You definitely need that. We don't need anything else. And I've asked for internal auditor, I think, for 3 or 4 years. That's not in the program, but we really do need an internal auditor to take care, to audit certain things and keep everybody up to par.
And I'll just,
it's not possible, but now the rental inspection is important, but code can continue to go around and is there a way, I don't know, maybe Miss City Attorney, if you would know, does code have people that have rent apartments or houses, is the only way code can come in their houses that you invite them, or can they go around and say, look, this house looked decrepit, I'm gonna go and inspect it? Is the law still that they can't come unless the resident,
They cannot come inside anyone's residence.
unless they invited?
Well, yeah, that's true, but I've never seen that happen. I'm sorry.
What, you never seen what?
Code enforcement being invited inside a residence.
Oh, yeah.
They do it all the
do.
time.
Yeah.
My residents do. I encourage them to.
Yep,
The landlord is not doing what he's supposed to do.
that's right.
Yeah, they do call. But
Oh,
that
yeah.
was told that they can only do that if the resident invite them in, so.
That's correct. But again, I'm just saying, I've never seen it, but if you all have your own experiences with that happening, that's fine. Permission is required though.
We don't have some of the greatest landlords.
Well, and I will say, we're correct. We do have instances where some do invite them in, but I know we had, because that program was mine at one point. We do have several people who are afraid to do that because they're concerned that they may be then find themselves not with a place to stay. But right now, Mrs. Pelham, they can go on the outside and they can inspect the property maintenance issues from the outside, but unless they're invited in, or if the property is part of the rental inspection program, if it's in the rental inspection program, then when you do that re-inspection, then you get to go inside with that.
Right. But that, I mean, that's just for 2 areas of town. It never crossed over to the other side.
Yeah, because I think area number 3 is supposed to be the Heights area, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Where we were going.
Mm-hmm.
And in actuality, I'm very much in favor of getting a rental inspection person because we wanted to expand that program. And we did not expand that program waiting on a person to be hired for that, based on the director's discussions with us to tell us that she could not handle another area and couldn't really handle the areas that she had because there was nobody doing this. We are constantly talking about how the livability for people, and to me, the highest priority of livability is what they're able to live in. And some of these landlords, as Ms. Pelham, as Councilor Pelham just indicated, are not the best landlords, and I wouldn't want people living in some of the places that they've got right now. And so I am very much on board with getting somebody for the rental inspection. For this would allow the director to then also put into effect harder and more stringent rental guidelines than we had from 2003, and thereby improving everybody's livability in this city, hopefully by getting some of the crappy landlords out and potentially looking for future revenues out of this as well. So I think it's important that we start this for the future of livability in Hopewell for our citizens. It's a primary for me. I can live with a pothole a little bit longer knowing that somebody's got a decent place to live, even though they may have a pothole. I'm absolutely for infrastructure improvement, like Councilor Parton said, but I think we've got to look at the housing situation in this city for our constituents. Thanks.
Mr. Altman, I have I found what I'm looking for. Do you mind if I follow up with that question now?
Sure.
So I'm going to see if I can share my screen really quickly. If not, can IT let me be able to share the screen, please? Or whoever's sharing, can they stop sharing?
I think the mayor's sharing, and she had to step away for a moment.
Okay.
And I'll just so everyone knows, the animal shelter custodian positions, the police department has had a real difficult time in hiring and keeping part-time people. So that's why they've asked for it to be converted to a full-time position. They feel they'll be more successful in getting an employee and keeping an employee than having part-time people in and out. So that's the reason behind the request for the conversion to the full-time position.
Is that 19,000 for benefits and a salary increase, or just a salary increase?
That's the total for salary and benefits. The difference, when you take the money that we have in the budget already and you convert that to the full-time, that would be the difference that would be needed to make it a full-time position.
So, I mean, so what's the cost of a full-time person without the benefits?
Start
off with.
Can I turn around and grab something off my other computer?
Sure, fine with me. I just want to know how much a dog catch you. You can go ahead, Ms. Gort.
I'll ask IT to make me a co-host so I can share the screen because apparently the chair's stepped away from her computer. I need for him to see his document. I could put the link in the chat box in the meantime.
So Mrs. Pelham, to answer your question, a full-time custodian position. So this is not someone out, this is someone who cleans the shelter, right?
Oh, a custodian.
Yeah.
There was a dog catcher.
No, this isn't a dog catcher. That full-time position salary is about $28,000, $29,000.
Okay. Thank you.
While we wait for her to get back, I can't do anything.
As
So
Jasmine Gore is the host now.
I've made you the host.
okay, thank you. All right, so hopefully you can see your screen. So what I'm asking is, do you see the paragraph right here in section 1 where it says general fund?
Mm-hmm.
This is our budget resolution.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, we have been told that the general fund is one of, I think, 12 funds I think we have, but the general fund is where our operating budget is housed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, the operating budget is considered assigned funding along with any other encumbrances that we may have. The other portion of the general fund is the unassigned portion. And historically, we have been told that unassigned is divided into 2 categories: the rainy day fund, and then what we consider like our checking account for cash. So our general fund is really 3 things: unassigned, which is the operating budget, assigned, which is the operating budget, unassigned, which is rainy day and cash. So what I've been trying to ask is, this is the budget that we adopt, general fund. It says here's all of our sources of money. If you scroll down, it starts talking about the appropriations, which is the operating budget that I'm talking about. So at the end, it says how much we're going to spend, which is like $58 or $56 million or higher sometimes. What's left over goes into unassigned. And if it's left over, it may go into rainy day fund, depending if our budget has increased to make sure we match that 10%. So the point that I'm saying is, if the revenue has reduced, how are you pulling from anywhere else but our savings if the general fund is our budget and our savings at the same time? It's all one pot of money in one fund.
So as you said,
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but so as you said, it's divided into 2 pieces. So assigned and unassigned.
Right.
We do not utilize any unassigned monies in developing a budget. We only develop a budget based on revenues that are going to be coming in. We don't go over to the money that's left over, the rainy day fund. Typically at the end of your audit, when your audit's done and you have money left over, it goes into the unassigned fund balance.
Or the cash
reserve. There at all. We only operate on the assigned side. We only utilize the revenues coming in there to develop a budget.
But the assigned side is what our operating budget is.
Correct.
Right. So either we built a budget taking more to go into, I'm not trying to be funny. Either it's a play on words or something. Because here's the thing: if you have the general fund, and the general fund, how it's appropriated out includes an operational budget, even though it's really not different. It's the same thing. The money that's left over in there is our cash. It's like our checking account. And then our reserves is our savings account. If you're taking money out of the checking account, whether or not it's in a general fund or a different name, you're still moving something from our cash unless, there's no other way. I don't understand what you're saying. It's all a part of the same pot of money. So if it's the exact same from the prior year, right? So if our budget in the general fund is the exact same from the prior year, then there's no change. But if you're taking, not you, but if there is a change and increasing it from a prior year, that is taking from somewhere if it's not coming in from revenue. And if the conversation was where there was a reduction in revenue received, then where else are you taking it from other than the check cash?
So we had an increase in revenue overall. The revenues that come in that we deal with on the general fund side of the world are real estate and M&T, where we have constant revenue. We know that's where we know how that's going to grow. We know typically what that's going to do. It's not subject to other than when the housing market crashed, the rise and fall of what's happening in the world. On the capital side of this budget, which you have here, if you flip a couple pages, it'll show capital. Well, let's see.
It's in the appropriation side.
Yeah,
right?
so it's in an appropriation part. There's a capital, but there's one of the last pages I think has capital, is the capital fund.
Right here, page
Right
56.
there. So Fund 71 is part of all of that, but it's a separate fund. And the funds that we typically have used to fund capital have been the other revenues we received. So that's meals, lodging, sales, and our 295 money. So what we're doing is we're not touching that unassigned, we're not touching that savings account. What we're doing is we had an increase in revenue this year to help us fund some increases in cost. But all you're doing is making a transfer out of what we typically call Fund 11. So if you go back to the very beginning, all of those revenues are shown in Fund 11, if I remember correctly on the first page.
Yeah, because that's it. Fund 11 is a general fund, but under capital improvement.
So if you go back to that page, you have Fund 11, which shows all the revenues. Then when you go to appropriations, you drop down on the appropriations, and there's a line that says operating transfers, 17 million. So those are dollars that come out of the general fund and go to those other funds shown in the budget. Schools, all of those other items.
Right.
So we're not taking it from anywhere else. We're not taking it it's all coming out of the revenue that we receive for the budget.
Right. Okay. But here it does not say transfer from Fund 11. It says the 295. That's what I'm saying. Where did we do that $500,000 unless it was a separate transfer from the general fund? I mean, we could talk offline, but I still don't see where this happened or how can that be in addition to what's already adopted.
In the current budget, which you can't, let's see. So I can find a way to make it show up without my background. But anyway, in the current budget resolution, capital projects fund 71. And we have estimated revenues from state sources, which is our VDOT stuff. And then we had last year, a current year, we had a transfer from the general fund. I-295, those dollars weren't really there because we had a shortfall. So we had a transfer from the general fund to help support capital. We had a transfer.
So when did, I'm not going to belabor this point, but when did we do that separate transfer? Because what we adopted was transfer from general fund, I-295 source, which is $230 is on the screen. And that's what we adopted. When did this other transfer of funds take place? Because we did not adopt that unless we came back separately doing that. That's why I'm not understanding it's not something separate.
Right. So this year, the transfer from the general fund was $230.
From 295.
We didn't have 295 money because they weren't out there. We saw a reduction in 295 money. So that's actually coming from the general fund, which is where the 295 monies would show up anyway from a revenue perspective.
Okay. So I understand that. I'll talk to you offline because here's the issue that I have. And it says we adopted general fund 11 295 specifically as a source of the monies. Since it did not come from 295 source of monies and it came from the general fund, no pun intended, but that is a different source of money, a different pot of money, and we did not take action on that.
When you adopted this resolution, when you adopted the resolution, that's what y'all adopted. You adopted
the resolution
utilizing
says
No,
from
you-
general fund, right here, I'm not trying to be funny. Can you just, again, we can talk about this offline, but it says transfer from general fund
Mhm.
11 to 95. It does not say just general fund 11 like it does above. That's a separate transaction.
And then we also had the last year's budget is right here. The biggest one we had last year was the transfer of debt service from the general fund. That was our big hit last year.
Right. I'm not disputing that transfers come from the general fund. I'm not disputing that because these are different funds. That's why we're doing a transfer, because they're going from one fund to another, like you said, no dispute. But the point I'm making is the reason why I was asking my question in the way that I was is because anything in addition to what we adopt is a separate transfer, and it is drawing on our cash. I mean, there's no other way to say that. If the what we adopted was 295, and if that money was not there, then we take it from the general fund. It's not coming from the pot of money that we said it was going to come from. It's coming from our checking account.
Right. Not
Right,
your
and that's the
savings,
point.
not your savings account, your checking.
Our check account, yes.
Right.
Right.
Which is your assigned fund balance.
Which is no, it's not.
Yes.
No. Okay, we can, again, we agree, disagree, but it is not assigned, because if it was assigned, it would be in this budget that we adopted. What's in this budget we adopt as appropriations is what's considered assigned. If we do not specifically state it is a transfer of funds or a utilization of money in our general fund, it is unassigned. That goes into our checking account, which is why I asked, what is the balance of our checking account? Anytime we pull from that, that is drawing against our checking.
And we did not draw from that to balance that budget that you see that we're currently in.
Okay, let's talk offline. I think I get the point that you're trying to make.
What you're saying, and I get what you're saying, and in this year's budget, there'll be a line under capital right there that will say transfer from general fund 11.
11, yes.
Right.
Okay. But
that's what we're talking about this year.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's why I'm able to say, instead of transferring all that money over, you pull some of that back to fund 11 to fund the increase in the COLA.
Right. Okay. So here, yes, you're talking about this year, but even with this year, the question is, what is the cash balance at the end? When we had this conversation with a previous city manager, we were talking about the audits. What was in the newspapers, what was told to people was like, oh, we have 50-something million dollars. And people kept thinking, oh, we have a lot of money, we're good to go. Not understanding that $50 million that he was talking about is the budget itself. So no, yeah, we may have had $50 million put into the bank, but how much of that was already assigned to do operations? You know, it's a play on words when people say that, knowing, and again, not directed to you, but that is not what we have left aside to spend. So if what we have in our checking account is 59, and our budget is 58 million, we only have $1 million in cash to play with for this example. And so what I'm saying is, every time you pull from that cash reserve, you are reducing how much we have in our checking account. And the point I'm trying to make here is, when you have transfer from general fund, I-295 specifically, when we adopted this budget, that money that was there was supposed to come from that specific spot. Since it did not come from that specific spot, that is a totally different transfer, that the only source of money is to take from that checking account, which is, for the example I just gave, is $1 million. So we are drawing down against it.
Okay. All right. So number one, I haven't said anything about $50 million being the money we have. So don't attribute those comments.
You said it earlier when I asked the question.
No, I didn't say we had $50 million in our bank account. I said we have $50 million. It's a $54 million proposed $54 million general fund budget.
Mm-hmm.
Not talking about unassigned, not talking about any of that. Okay. So this is a $54 million proposed operating budget, inclusive of all of the funds that are listed there.
Okay.
So in the current budget year, we had $230,000 of general fund money transfer from 295. That money, that is down. That's down. Okay. The current year, we're having to make a $500,000 transfer from the general fund over to capital to support that, which will be a different line in that budget resolution. Similar to what you have up top last year, where we had to make a general fund transfer. We making a general fund transfer for debt service to pay the debt service. So we haven't gone into any unassigned monies to balance the budget. We're only utilizing dollars that we have. We're only in this current year, we're only utilizing the dollars that are shown and how they're assigned in that resolution. And it'll be that way for the upcoming year. What I'm just talking about is, as opposed to having a transfer from general fund 11 to capital of $500,000 in this year's budget, we can pull some of that back and utilize it towards the COLA. That's all in the current budget.
Okay, can you just give us the balance of
you've already asked for the current
unassigned,
amount in the unassigned.
and the total amount that was moved from the general fund outside of what was adopted in the budget? And
Haven't moved anything outside of what was adopted in the budget.
okay, but you just sat there and said we transferred from 295 when it wasn't available.
No.
But
What
okay.
I said was, in the budget that you're showing us, had a reduction in what we normally receive in 295 money. I didn't say we had it below 230. It was a reduction. We didn't get normally what we get. That's why the 230 is there. And typically it's higher.
Okay.
That's what I said.
And then you said there was an additional, you said there was a transfer from the general fund. Where is that at for capital
That's
projects?
that transfer that I was talking about. The 295 money is the money coming from the general fund to capital in the current year. The proposed budget will have a different line that won't have 295 by it. The proposed budget, not the one we're looking at, the proposed
So
budget.
this one will be the reduction in the cash reserves that I'm talking about.
No, there's no reduction.
Okay, we'll just talk offline. We'll talk offline. We'll talk offline. How about that? Just
There's
give me
no
the
reduction.
balances.
There's no reduction in cash reserves when you have additional revenue to you don't need a reduction in cash reserves when you have new revenue coming in that allows you to make that move.
I think what we're forgetting is that there is a constant in-stream of money.
No, I'm
that
not forgetting
we are
anything. I
budgeting
know
on.
what I'm asking, and I know what I'm not being funny. I know exactly what I'm asking, and so I'll just talk to him offline. Just to end this, I support the rental inspection program person. I did request it last year in our budget cycle, but there wasn't enough support to do it then. So I definitely support it now if people want to address that program. But I also think, in agreeing with Councilor Pelham and Vice Mayor Parton, that we need to look at some neighborhood improvements, particularly when it comes to flooding, and then also find a way for citizens to realize what in our budget is directly impacting them in terms of what they can see in their community to improve their quality of life. So if there's a way we can get something like that, that'd be great. If not, I'll figure out a way to try to communicate that. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Are you, Ms. Boer, are you okay with the raise?
In theory, but I want to talk to you. To
Okay.
get yeah. Because the reason why I want to understand, again, I'm going off of historically what we have done in our understanding of what we were told how the budget was broken down, but also how it relates back to the school's money, because we're talking about the bus reserve, and there was a determination made that we would continue this giving back the bus fund money until the audits were caught up. And so if we're going to reconsider doing that, then that's a whole nother conversation that we have to have with the schools. But the whole point I'm trying to make is, the more we add to the budget with reoccurring costs, whether it be for staff, the salary, increasing the school's budget, helping them with their raises, whatever it is, that's going to keep adding to what we have to find money for next time. And if we're going to supplement CARES Act or the HEROES Act, whatever federal, state dollars we get to help us in the interim, and we're creative about it, that's fine. But once that aid ends, we're going to have to plug all of those holes. And so I just want to make sure I understand this, that 500,000, I understand the money with the school and the bus, and even the projections for how this CARES money will be used to supplement stuff in the budget. Because when this is all said and done, if our revenue projections are not spot on, we're going to be having to figure out how to recoup that money.
Good point. That's a good point.
Ms. Randolph?
Yes, thank you. I will say that last year's budget, we were so intent on just cutting costs to try and start from fresh that many things weren't considered. One of the things that was just brought up is infrastructure by Mr. Parton, Councilor Gore, and Councilor Pelham, and flooding in particular by Councilor Gore. And I agree, but one of the things that we've just taken advantage of, I believe, is, Mr. Altman, the money that was going to go from through McEachin for the area around the railroad that creates quite a bit of flooding for a number of people. Is that not correct?
Yeah, if that project is ultimately funded through the congressional appropriation, it would address actually flooding in at least, well, really, as you look at backup flooding, at least 3 to 4 districts and the railroad crossing. It all comes to four wards come together at that point in the city. So it affects a great number of people.
So, yeah, we've put in for that. Thank you for going ahead and doing that. And I agree that if we keep spending, we are going to have to plug holes, but none of this was said to the schools when we met with them. And not that I don't want to fund schools, but if they keep 1.8 million from that bus fund, then I would expect them to pay for the full $300,000 munis conversion out of that money. Because to be looking for us to give them $1.8 million and then an increase of over $1 million in their budget from last year, and a $600,000 increase on top of everybody getting raises, you know, I think that we've got to have another conversation with them anyway. I'm not trying to be hard on the schools, but we're trying to be hard on a budget and what we can pick and choose from. And, you know, giving them that much money in a year's time frame puts us at a disadvantage, I believe. And we wanted to give our staff a raise too, and they're only going to get half of what the school staff is going to get. So I think that as groups that can work together, I would like to see the schools work with us a little harder to try and figure out for this year's budget how we're all going to give and take. And I think that, as I said previously, I think that is a big thing that all of us on council need to look at before we finalize this budget. And so I'll be happy to get together with them again and see this, because I am physically conservative as well, and I want to keep our budget as low as possible, but we have put off many things, and I think it's time for us to pick and choose a few things that the city needs as well, and have those things be a benefit to both schools and the city. Thank you.
Mr. Parton?
First, I just want to let everybody know that I received a message from Mayor Bennett, and she had to step away, and she won't be coming back on the meeting tonight. Just to give everybody a heads up about that. And to answer your question, Mr. Altman, I'm not really in favor of adding positions at the expense of reducing our capital budget. I know that, I say this all the time, especially over at our Water Renewal Commission meetings, but to only have a $1.2 million capital budget for an entire city. I mean, I just think that that's just incredibly low, and I really would like to see it ramped up, just on the similar philosophy of what we're trying to do down over at the wastewater plant. I really would like to see some areas where there might be some cost savings that we might be able to apply to this, and maybe we can fund a position or two or something along those lines with some cost savings that we find. But that's kind of where I stand right now on that. But I did have a question for you in the projects that were submitted. In there, you talked about street lighting, and I believe it had a cost associated with it for $10,000. Is that $10,000 to do the entire city of Hopewell?
No, that's
Okay. That's what I thought.
No. It's to replace all of our existing lights, which we currently have some LEDs, but to replace all of our existing lights with LEDs, it will cost a little bit more than $200,000.
A little more than $200,000.
Yeah. And there's actually, in theory, we would receive a cost savings as a result of that in our annual bill that, over a number of years, if you costed it out, it would, we would break even and save money. But to do the actual capital piece, which is just replacing what we have, it isn't adding additional lighting, just replacing what we have currently, is a little bit more than between $200, I think, and $250,000 to do the entire city. Dominion couldn't do that at one fell swoop because they limit the number of lights per project. So you'd have to break the entire city up into a bunch of small projects and then fund that. You could fund it, but then it would get done over a period of time. It wouldn't get all done. They wouldn't come in with a bunch of trucks and do it all at one time. They got to piece it out. But not the 10,000 isn't for the entire city. That's probably funding we have just to be able to address a light out here, or do we need to add a light in a spot? That's the money that we have available to do that.
Okay. So if a majority on city council was in favor of doing that and set aside money in this budget to do something like that, and because it would be a capital improvement, that money would roll over year after year after year until all the lights are completely done. Is that correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
That's actually the Dominion conversion process is one of the things that I'm looking at to suggest for the American Rescue Plan Act money.
Okay. I mean, that's just something that I think that would be extremely beneficial, and probably wouldn't even have to add new lights in the city because your sector of light would actually expand greatly.
Yeah, well, we do have a couple of areas where the distance between lights is deficient. So we, within that project, we could add some lights as we see fit. But you're right. I think just initially adding the upgrading of the lighting would help significantly. And then we could look at how we could then add lights in between two existing lights to provide a little bit more of a coverage than what we have now. But you're correct. As we saw when everybody probably experienced when they added the LED lights to the bridge going across the Appomattox, it got a lot brighter, not only on the bridge, but down on Riverside Avenue in the loop. So you're right. You are correct. We'll see a benefit almost immediately from that improvement.
And did they say roughly how much cost savings would come from that by any chance?
They did, and they broke it out over how many years. I can go back and look at that email. I have it. I don't remember the number off the top of my head.
Okay. I mean, that would be something I just think would be incredibly beneficial for our neighbors and for crime prevention, and then also just provide a good cost savings to the city. I mean, that's something I would definitely like to see implemented as soon as possible.
That's one of the reasons why I was looking at that Rescue Plan Act money. It's that those are one-time kind of dollars that you'd want to spend on one-time capital projects So that's one of the ones that I'd like to queue up to get done. And we could, because it would take more than 1 year, we wouldn't have to fully fund it out of one, because we're going to get that allocation of those funds over 2 years. We could plan for half of it 1 year and half of it for the following year. And as long as that project is active, those funds will roll over in capital.
Okay. I mean, my thought would be just to go and, set aside all the money at one time. And then that way it's, permanently allocated, hopefully, future councils, wouldn't, tamper or change it. And then that way we could see this all the way through. But I know that that's something that we can't obligate, future councils towards. But thank you, Mr. Altman.
You're welcome.
Vice Mayor Purdy, I'm unable to raise my hand because I'm sharing the screen. Do you mind if I speak? Because I don't see any other hands raised.
Sure.
All right, thank you. So, Mr. Altman, forgive me if I missed this earlier. I had to step away. For the fire department, I see they have like the EMS billing software and something else with billing and payments. But 3-4 years ago, we created a position specifically to do the fire recovery program. Can you explain more about what this is and how is that program going? Does this go to that program?
So this is the software that the internal program uses to do the billing. So that's what that software is for. The Zoll Data Systems EMS billing software is the internal software program that we use. We're doing well. We're not doing quite as well as we were last year, just because of the simple fact that the individual that we had in the position left, and we've had some turnover in that position. We filled it, and so we're looking at we're recovering money. We're just not recovering it as quickly as we were previously. The dollars that we recover don't necessarily go specifically to that. They go, everything gets put in that general fund revenue, and then it gets divvied out across the budget. So it's not really a directed source towards this. It's put in the pot, and the pot's distributed.
So is this is this like an annual fee, or
Yes,
because it's going up? Okay.
Yeah.
I have 2 more questions. And when we go down to the positions, I'm sorry, I'm scrolling too fast. Thank you for adding all of the positions in here. So can you explain admin's thought process for, not supporting some of the positions so we can have a understanding of when we prioritize? I know why I feel like the rental inspection position, obviously the position for downtown for the Wi-Fi is also important, and Munis. But the firefighters, I don't recall us adding a fire position in a very long time. We've done the police several times, but I haven't remember us adding anything for fire department. The neighborhood planner, I've been speaking to Director Griffin. I know that there's a need there, but what was the thought process with prioritizing some of these positions so we can take that into account?
So the rental inspection position is the one that of those up there, aside from the Munis administrator, that those 2 in my mind are the most important at this point moving forward. I place a high priority also on the neighborhood planner, but given a choice between the planner and the rental inspector that we know, and then we've talked about the need to ramp up that program since I've been back. So that's the reason for the priority on the rental inspector position. I don't disagree that with downtown Wi-Fi and then Wi-Fi rolling out, we'll have those issues, but given a limited amount of money to be able to work with, I think the IT Munis administrator position directly benefits more than one department, and we can work through in this budget year to see how what the call volume looks like if we have that, what it looks like for the Wi-Fi issues, and look towards next year's budget with that. The animal shelter position, just because they've had such a difficult time keeping a person in the people in those positions, and knowing that the state comes down and does audits of the shelter. And right now, if we don't have part-time people, and we had that happen during the current budget year where we didn't have part-time people, we've had to have animal control officers, police officers, anybody go down and do that. So we need to have someone there that's taking care of the shelter itself. We haven't added firefighters in a number of years, but that's such a huge reoccurring hit to the budget that's something that we really need to have a conversation. If council is interested in adding positions to fire, there is a safer grant program similar to what PD has for the COPS grant, where you can apply and the federal government will provide 100% funding for year one, and that steps down. And I think by year 3 or 4, we're having to foot that bill completely. But you just have to know that and plan for that going into those budget processes, that you're going to be paying 0 the first year. Maybe it's 20%, 40%, and then 100%, whatever their percent differences may be. But we haven't really had a conversation, and we haven't really had much of a conversation since I've been back about adding positions in general. The first 2 years that I was here, there was a definitive no, we're not adding positions. Last year we had a discussion, but we were in COVID and we didn't know what the outcome of that would be and the effects that it would have. So we backed off on trying to add any positions. This year, with the increase in revenue, we have a limited ability to add. So those are the priorities that I placed on where we are, the need to get out and improve and work to improve the quality and standard of our rental property in the community, helping internally with our IT administration, and basically have that go-to person in the organization to help with munis issues. And again, the need to help out police at the shelter.
Can you give that information regarding that grant for the fire department? Because I would like to look into it, because we haven't given them positions. And in fairness, we did not want to add positions because that was supposed to be an incentive when you first, I think you came into that budget session when we froze it, because we were trying to get the audits done. And that's when we were not.
I think y'all froze the year before.
In 16, we did it in 16.
17, and I came in 18, but the same philosophy was still in place.
Yes, that once the audits were caught up, then we would start adding additional projects. So we froze projects as well, because we wanted to know what our money was looking like before we committed to reoccurring revenue. But as it pertains to this budget, again, forgive me if I missed it, is this with the assumption, what is the assumption with these numbers with the schools 1.8 that they're asking for?
The 1.8 is what would be coming back to them, or what would be coming from the 18 audit. That's
so in this scenario, they're getting it.
Yes, I have not proposed in this scenario to retain any of that money. We'll deal with, we're gonna have to deal with schools. If we reduce the amount of money that they receive, then it would come and help our side of the house, obviously. But I haven't messed with that piece, because that's, I think, as Ms. Randolph said, that's another discussion that we have to have. Because I believe when we looked at their increases outside of the raise, the 5% raise, I think the majority of those funds, 1.7 of the 1.9 was coming from the state. But when you looked at their class and comp, the positions and the health insurance increase, I think that equaled up to 1.3 million total additional revenue, plus the $280,000 for the local match for the 5% raises. That puts you at that 1.5 level for their increase. That 1.8 would address that, but then they still have the differential between what we gave them in last year's budget as the supplemental. So, we've got to have some conversations, and obviously we'll have a public hearing with them, but where can they, and I know one of the things that I mentioned during the budget work session was they talked about the 5% raise, and they were going to give the employee the higher of the two, whether it was the 5% raise or the class and comp. My suggestion is that if the class and comp stays in the budget, that everyone should get the state 5%. That then reduces our obligation on the local side in the class and comp by 5%, that whatever that dollar figure is. So if Jasmine Gore is a second grade, well, in this instance, whatever position you were, you're second grade teacher in class and comp, you're supposed to get an 8% raise. Don't use 8% of all local money, use 5% of state and 3% of state local money. And that reduces that $600,000 obligation. So taking full advantage of the state money and helping with the class and comp. I don't know that I would want to have someone get the 5%, the 8% class and comp plus 5%. That's real rich.
Yeah. And, we just had one work session, from my recollection is correct. So we just heard what they had to say. So there really wasn't an opportunity for us to really chime in besides ask questions or really state our a position or opinion, because we were there to hear.
Yeah.
So when we have the next one, that would be great. I'll just say that, if we have a way to pull out some stuff, that would be helpful, because one thing I've been an advocate of is implementing a strategic plan so that we know what we're trying to accomplish and what we need to appropriate funds for, or earmark funds for, so that way we can tell the public that this is what we are striving to achieve. And since that hasn't been adopted yet, I still think that if there is a way in this budget to pull out what might be a direct, I don't want to use the word benefit, but something for the citizens to see what's going on with their dollars in the budget, I think that would be helpful and something that we should start doing as a city. I know we give the budget out. I'm glad we're going to move forward open finance, but the public really needs to have an understanding of what happens with the budget cycle and, seeing the projects and what's coming from this whole process. I think you said what?
I'll say, well, unfortunately, we've kind of regressed. I know when I was here before, not towards the end of my time here, but kind of in the middle, when we had adopted and council had adopted a strategic plan, we changed our budget formatting to show and match increases or new programmatic initiatives in their relationship to implementing strategic plan initiatives. So we tied our budgeting into our strategic plan and how the budget request was helping implement an item that was in our strategic plan. So we abandoned that at some point in time while I was here, but we were doing that, and that has been one of my objectives from a long-term perspective, is to get that back in play, get a strategic plan adopted, and then we can begin to formulate our budget around strategic initiatives and how we are funding them and how those are having an impact on the community.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more questions for Mr. Altman? Okay, seeing no hands raised, Mr. Altman, do you have anything else that you'd like to share?
No, sir. You got a list of every single capital project that was submitted there for y'all to look at. The last budget presentation we had, and again, the bulk of our money currently is going to fund those VDOT projects that Mr. Butler and Mr. Anderson work on. But I do want to say thank you to council on behalf of all of the employees for your willingness to consider a 2.5% cost of living increase for them. It was, for me, a rather difficult task to look at what everyone else was getting and knowing that we weren't going to be able to do anything for our people. So I do appreciate council's willingness to consider that, and for y'all to put your voice, your support this evening for that. Thank you very much. And that's all I have for this evening, Mr. Parton.
Okay, Ms. Pelham?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, when you come back for us to vote on this part of with the COLA in the positions, can you give us the options? Because it sounds like it's disagreement about which positions will be funded or not. So if you could do the raise with the different positions, for all of them, but.
So what, Ms. Pelham, what I was actually thinking is that I would put the raise in the budget proposal and then have to the side the positions and let y'all have a discussion of the positions.
Right. Very good. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Anyone else have any closing questions or comments?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have one more thing. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to ask you, Ms. Counselor Pelham, is that what you indicated you wanted us to talk about in closed session?
No.
What you
I'm
just
talking
about?
about 3 employees.
Okay, so that wasn't what you're wanting us to talk about next week in closed. Okay,
We'll talk about 3 employees in closed session. Yes.
okay.
Okay.
The proposed employees, is that what you were referring to?
No, I think she's talking about me, the attorney, and the clerk.
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry. That's what I was just wanting to see what we were talking about next week. That's all. Thanks.
Those 3.
All right.
Uh,
Questions?
you talked to us about last year you were working on something with healthy families because we had indicated that the current way they were under the city was not, I don't know how to use the right word, something was wrong. I can't remember the right verbiage.
So there was a discussion of
Bring something.
them being employees versus not being employees, and that's kind of the crux of the decision that still needs to be made is,
Yeah.
do we want to continue them to be employees, which is how we had been dealing with them for years, or do we want to try to have them become outside of that? We never revisited that issue during the year, but that's still the kind of the crux of where we are. I can say that their numbers for Hopewell, service of Hopewell youth are through the roof. This year they've served more children in the city than they have in the past probably 5 years, which was good in the sense that we're getting, reaching out and providing service to children and families as a result of that. The depressing part of it was when we sat down with the people from the state level healthy families, the whopping reward for doing more than we've ever done before, I think, was an additional $1,000 that they were going to provide. So that was a little depressing in the fact that we're doing more, helping more, so we'll give you $1,000. Fantastic. And we still have question with regard to Prince George and their contribution to the Hopewell Prince George Healthy Families Organization. But yeah, that's the issue that's out there is, do we want to continue them as city employees? We could roll them in as a department, or do we want to have them outside of that? And the issue really comes down to the benefit side. And we can't provide you benefits if you're not considered an employee. So those people that had health insurance, probably would be difficult for Healthy Families as an organization, as small as they are, to get any kind of competitive health insurance. And certainly the VRS benefit that they currently have would go away. So retirement would go away also.
So whatever the situation is, we have to correct it this time. I'm voting no again for the whole budget. I think we can't keep this lingering on. They either become their own entity and we provide a grant to them like they get grants from everywhere else, and then they can, get their own insurance, or we have to make a decision to make them a department. And I don't know if Madam Attorney can just tell us what our options are as well, but I don't think we can just let that linger without correcting it and just keep letting it what y'all call it, kicking the can down the road. We got to make a decision. Okay. So you need to come up with a recommendation so we can do one or the other. And I'll be,
Is that to me?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think I've actually addressed some of this in the past.
Yes.
So as I it, the ball was in the administration's court to determine whether or not it was feasible to bring them on as a department. I mean, I can repeat what I've said before.
I just want the council, I mean, we have to make that decision, so I just think if everyone just can remember that before the budget is over, we gotta make a decision about that group as well. And I think the city manager has to bring us the options to do that.
We can bring that back to you. Yes, ma'am.
Sure. And I'll be available to assist as he needs.
Thank you,
Okay,
ma'am.
thanks.
All right, Ms. Denton? Counselor Denton, you're still muted.
Thank you. Since we're straying a little ways from the agenda, I think we've covered everything in regards to capital and the COLA. I'd like to make a motion the meeting be adjourned.
Second. So you don't need discussion for it. Roll call, please, Ms. Bess.
Vice Mayor Parton,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Pallam,
Yes.
Counselor Gore,
Yes.
Counselor Randolph,
Yes.
Counselor Holloway,
Yes.
Mayor Bennett is not here, so Vice Mayor Parton, you have 6 yes, 1 absent.
All right. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our meeting. Hope everyone has a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.